Good evening, students.
Good evening, ma'am.
So I hope that you people are doing good, and I hope that you are safe and sound in health as well. Okay, for today's session, we are going to have a look on the sentence correction. So initially, you might have studied about spotting errors, maybe in the last class. Uh, okay, they would have taught you what is spotting errors and how you to do that and everything. And for today's session, we are going to be focused on the sentence correction. Okay, almost it may look similar to spotting errors, but still we have more difference on it. So we are going to uh, look in detail. All right. So, and what is sentence correction when it comes? So, before we get into it, first we must understand what is sentence. I hope that you will know that. So, what is sentence, kinds of sentences? What are the mistakes commonly occurred when it comes for sentences? So, usually, what we used to predict when it comes for correction, for example, when the topic comes like this sentence correction. So whatever, what could be the mistakes we can easily identify in the sentence? It might be like grammatical errors or spelling errors or punctuation errors and many like. Okay, so grammatical. So like these kind of errors we can expect in the sentences so that it can be rectified and even we can call it as a sentence correction. Okay, so anyhow we are going to have a look in detail. So first we must understand what is sentence correction. All right. So what is sentence correction? I had just given you a small definition. So how it is. Sentence correction, even it can be even called as error spotting. It is one of the most scoring area of verbal section in any competitive examination. Okay, so it is not only just for the sake of questioning. Instead, this is one of the easiest way for the evaluator to come to a conclusion whether the candidates are eligible or whether the candidates are capable of doing that particular job, or even if it's for kind of any competitive examination. It is one of the easiest way to evaluate, and moreover it is also one of the most scoring area when it comes for verbal section. So I hope in the very first class of your placement class you might have been informed what are the methods of methods of evaluation and how your skills would be evaluated. Maybe you might have been informed different sections when it comes for when it comes for English. So what kind of questions you can expect in the form of language, in the verbal analogy or reading comprehensions. Okay, some questions related to language and some questions you may get related to mathematical. Some questions might be related to the logical and reasoning. Like that, you might have been informed in the very first class how the placement questions would be, right? So similarly, when it comes for language, we have different kinds like spotting error, sentence correction, verbal analogy. So alphabet analogy, like that we have. But anyhow, so we are going to have a look on here. So sentence correction, it is also called as error spotting, is one of the most scoring area of verbal section in any competitive examination. Okay, so in this question, one or more sentences with some, but since we are being very much focused on sentence correction, it is not word correction, it is not about vocabulary, it is not about any alphabets, it's completely, it's been called as sentences. So our focus to be on the sentences, that is how we need to require to check whether if there is any error in the sentence or in the marked parts of it. So usually, since we are talking about sentences, so the mistakes can be found only in sentences. Generally, when we get when we get questions based on this sentence correction, so what are the things that we must know in order to find out the right answer or in order to solve it? So how we can be familiar and at the same time how we should be aware of it. Okay. So for that, I had just given you what are the rules for sentence correction. Generally, you need to know as a basic idea. As the name itself, verb used in the sentences should be accordance with the subject. So once if you read this sentence or once if you hear this one, I hope that you would definitely remember in the first semester, I believe. First or second semester, I'm not very sure. So I hope that you might have been aware of the subject verb agreement, right? Concord. So always the very first rule. So always singular noun should have a singular verb, plural noun must have a plural verb. So that subject should be agreed with the verb like that. I hope definitely you might remember those things. So let us recall some of the essential because the whatever things that we have learned in the first year, the first semester and the second semester, talking about English. Okay, so in those days we would have learned just for the sake of examination, but actually, so maybe you might know the importance of it. It's something related to life skills, right? That you must be familiar with those things. So even if you have forgotten, no issues. At least try to recall those things and try to be very clear with that. So you should. That's a basic form base. Okay, so only based on that your questions you can expect when it comes to a kind of competitive examination as well. So for example, let's recall some of the essential rules. So very basic rules, okay, for subject verb agreements in case of collective nouns like police, army, herd, etc. So the verb used is singular. So generally for collective nouns, we will use singular verb form. So what is correction of sentence in English grammar? So sentence correction or sentence improvement. Okay, so even it can be called as a sentence improvements. It's one of the type of grammatical practice. Very simple. So sentence correction, which means it's a type of a grammar practice where a sentence is given with a word or a phrase that requires grammatical changes or some more improvement. Okay, so the sentence might have been wrong or wrongly phrased. Okay, so we need to identify the right one and we must change it according to the need of grammar, or if it's need of improvement, we should do accordingly. A sentence requires modification either grammatically or contextually to have a better understanding of the same. So how we can learn sentence correction in language? So as I told you earlier, so first thing that we must be very clear with this subject verb agreement, what you have learned in the first semester or it might be the second semester. Okay, I don't remember exact semester where where did you learn it. So first thing that you must be very clear with the subject verb agreement. In any sentence, the verb should agree with the subject in person as well as in number. Okay. So in other words, if the subject is singular, the verb should be also singular. If the subject is plural, then verb must be also plural. So for example, he refers, it's a singular form. Okay, so I hope that you would know what is subject verb agreement. Still, I would like to explain you. Maybe some people might have forgotten it. Okay, for example, we take this first phrase. For example, after that, we have a word called he plays. Okay, he plays. It's a sentence. He means it's a singular one, right? And the verb is play. So he plays, here you may have a doubt just because of having yes in the verb, we cannot call that as a plural verb. Okay, so he plays, whereas when we come to the next one, they play. Okay, they is a plural one, play is also a plural verb. Okay, so here you need not to get confused just because of having yes in the verb, it cannot be called as the plural verb. All right. And similarly, just because of not having yes in the verb, we cannot call that as a singular one. Okay, so based on the context, based on the noun, so always if the subject is singular, verb will be also singular. If the subject is plural, the verb would be also a plural one. Okay, this is how the very basic rule that we must be aware of it. Okay, this is how we can learn the basic subject verb agreement. So how do you correct an error in a sentence generally? Okay, it is not something very new topic to you. So you are very familiar with these things, but still we may fail. to identify the error. Sometimes we may find it difficult to identify. Okay, so how, in that case, how we can correct an error in a sentence? First thing, read the sentences all the way through. So sometimes you may notice when you read the sentences, maybe in the examinations, only at that time you may know that is the very first time that I mean, sometimes, okay, I'll make it very simple then. You may not even able to identify the error in the sentence because this whole sentences might seem to be right to you. So for that, it's the reason behind that is lack of practice. Okay, that is all. So once if you have been practiced with the subject verb agreement rules and various grammar practice, very simple. Whatever things that you have learned in the first semester and the second semester in technical English as well as communicative English, whatever the topics that you have covered, even that is more than enough to be familiar with all the grammar topics. Okay, so once if you have been through it, so it was very easy to identify the right, I mean the error in a sentence. So that is what I had. I can make it very clear or very simple even we can call it as. So you can read the sentences all the way through. Okay, first read the sentences. So only if you have practiced before, only if you do that practice, when you read the sentence, you can easily identify the error. So maybe, okay, we shall look in detail further. So then, what can be the next step to identify the error in this sentence? You can check each underlined portion. Sometimes in the question, you might have given only the question without highlighting any errors. You have to find out the error in the sentences. Or sometimes they themselves would have given you the highlighted errors. In that you should give the right answer. So if you have given in that way, you should able to perform the right answer. So for that only second point says so. So check each underlined portion. So finally, you can confirm it why the word you picked is wrong. Okay, so once if you are very clear with the wrong option, so you can easily find out the right one, or even you can able to find out the right answer as such. Okay, so first thing, so what are the common mistakes that we can easily able to identify? So number one, so as I mentioned earlier, you must be very clear with grammar. Only then you can able to manage with these kind of questions. All right. So what's the purpose of grammar? First thing that you can be very clear with the meaning. What they said. It's not about only the placement. It's not about only the competitive examination. Just in our day-to-day life, when we converse or when we make a practice with the language, so when we want to have a clarity in the meaning, okay, so that is the basic purpose of grammar. Okay, if we want to be very clear with the meaning what we convey or we converse, the ultimate purpose of the grammar is that. And number two is, so only if you have a sound grammar, it's not even a sound idea or sound knowledge about grammar. So the basic grammar should be very clearly learned. Only then your sentences or your ideas can be readable. And credibility. Okay, I have given you one, one caption for you like, let's eat grandma, let's eat grandma. Okay, so here you can easily find out the difference. So just it's very simple example that you can easily understand as well. So let's eat grandma. So there is no punctuation in the sentences. So which means, okay, so I need not explain more on these examples. So you may able to understand the importance of punctuation. If it doesn't have a punctuation, what could be the meaning? If we have punctuation, what could be the meaning? So you knew it, right? So I hope that you may understand the importance of the errors in the sentences and how we should find out the right answer. All right. So generally, when it comes for sentence corrections or any other corrections, so usually we may have these types of errors in general. So it's quite applicable with the sentences since most of the questions would be asked in the form of sentences rather vocabulary or rather alphabets. So usually your questions would be based on the sentence format, right? So types of errors. So usually the errors will be based on this. One is it might be a word-to-word error. So in questions you can find out these kind of errors can be seen. Word-to-word error. Then sometimes the error can be related to punctuation. Sometimes even the usage error. So what is this wrong word? I mean, which means wrong word errors. So in this we have a spelling error, typographic mistakes. So you need not to just rely on the spell check. So if you are being with online or practicing over the online, that is quite applicable to get the right one immediately. But when it comes for examination perspective or during the time of examination, sometimes it might not possible. So that you must be very clear with this, what are the wrong word errors. So usually it has spelling error, then typographic mistakes, next even wrong meaning. Okay, so wrong meaning, so for that you can even use dictionary. So you when I'm talking about the during the time of a practicing session. So before you go for examinations, so I hope that you would definitely do some practicing session for a year. So right now you have been in third year, right? So third year, so this year onwards you will start practicing questions based on these placements, so that it would be easy for you to manage at that time of extent, right? So what can be done? So maybe using dictionary might help you, or sometimes nowadays it's totally 21st century learners never been relied on the dictionary. Okay, so now you have been into online, and most of the time you've been clinged on the mobile phone. So even you can use okay, mobile dictionary, thesaurus app, so many apps. So even if it's not so, you can make use of it using your Android devices. Okay, so you can even careful using thesaurus and watch it for which the wrong shade of meaning or even the wrong meanings altogether. So sometimes you must be a little cautious on the meaning of a word. Sometimes it may have the wrong shade. Uh, mm, for example, okay. We'll just go with the next one, so I don't want to confuse you. So what are the commonly confused words? So spell check won't catch this, so we'll just move on further so that it would be clear what the kind of things that we are going to look on. So what are the commonly confused words? So this is quite common thing that you do familiar, but still I just wanted to stress on the people who may not be into it. Okay, so still, so there. So they are. So when we have apostrophe going to store together. So if you have this, it's a contraction of they are is there. The managers are in their weekly meetings. So if you look at THEIR, it's a possessive. So these are the common confused words, so that you can be very clear what are the words and what is the meaning for each and every words that we go through. Next, to place the flowers there. So even if you have there THERE, okay, it indicates location, directions. And what are the next commonly confused words? That you are, your. So you are, it's again the contraction of you are. So you are going to be a great writer. Sometimes your hair looks nice today. So this is even becomes under possessive. Next to common confused words that you can notice is whose. Okay, whose again the contraction of who is, and whose works again the possession. So next, it's you can identify the difference between all three. It's a beautiful day. It's a contraction of it is, and you can even download the program along with its README file. That's possessive, and it's not a word. So you can easily find out the commonly confused words. And the next one is affect and effect. So the outage shouldn't affect anyone during work hours. So if you look at verb, it's to act on or influence, the meaning for the effect. And outage shouldn't have any effect on uses. So noun is the result. So EFFECT is a result of any action, might be called as. Okay. And the other confusing words to. Okay. This to TO is a preposition. TOO is also. So it is an adverb. And my jacket is too small, which is excessive amount. Okay. And I have 2 buttons missing. So it also indicates the number. And here again, the common confused words that can be a lot, a lot, a lot. The workers are worrying a lot about their job. So a lot is an adverb. So to a great degree or extent. So a lot is not a word. Okay, a lot. So usually we used to, use this kind of words in our normal day conversation, but it's wrong. Okay, there is no word called a lot, but ALLOT is a word that we can use. Okay, so sometimes we might maybe even be clear with the spelling usage as well. We were each allotted 20 tickets. Okay, that is verb, even to assign or even distribute. So this kind of errors that we have seen so far is a word-to-word error. And sometimes even punctuation also could be one of the errors when it comes for sentences, like commas, using comma, and sometimes coordinating conjunction like and, but. Okay, I hope you you do know what are the conjunctions, right? So conjunctions and even comma also make an error in a sentences. Okay, the game was over, comma, but the crowd refused to leave. So yesterday was her birthday, so they went out to a dinner. So sometimes use comma after introductory clauses, phrases. Okay, so usually even in that caption also we had seen that if there is no punctuation, the whole meaning may go wrong, especially with the comma as well. So even using comma after introductory clause or phrases, words that comes before the main clause. So while I was eating, comma, therefore, comma, henceforth, comma. So usually we used to, we generally use these words, but we may fail to have comma after these words. So we have to be even careful because the whole sentence or whole meaning of the sentences may go wrong. At the same time, it may not be meaningful sometimes. Okay. And using commas even to separate 3 or more words or even phrases or clauses written in series. The Constitution establishes the legislative, executive, and even judicial branches of government. And even we must use commas to set apart a parenthetical phrases in a sentences. Even you can have that as an example here. So my friend Jessica, who lives in Connecticut, is a yoga teacher. Okay, even you can. So this is the basic purpose of using comma generally. And what is the purpose of using semicolons? Okay, so these are the errors we can commonly observe in a sentences, but we are not very keen to observe it. So that is how we are not able to identify the error and we are not able to identify the right one. Okay. So semicolons, when it comes, use a semicolon. Where we must use semicolon? So generally, if the question has been arised like where comma has to be inserted, so somehow you can able to manage and you can give the answer that these after therefore, or somehow you can able to manage with this question. So you may know where to use commas, but sometimes people may feel very difficult in using semicolons. So use semicolons where we must use. So generally, we must use semicolons between 2 related independent clause. So it is not possible to explain you what is clauses, independent, dependent clause, and so on as of now. Okay, since we are being much focused on correction alone. So clauses means, I hope you know that, right? Independent clause, okay, main clause, subordinate clause, subject, predicate in the sense. Okay, that are not joined by the conjunction. So that is very simple. So independent clause which is not joined by conjunctions, the participants in the first study were paid. So when two sentences doesn't connect with the conjunction, that is the independent clause. Okay, so I hope you got it. So the participants in the first study were paid. That is one part of sentences. Those in the second were unpaid. Okay, so the sentence has two different clauses and two are independent clauses because two haven't joined using conjunctions. Sometimes the sentence used to be joined by using conjunctions like but and something very common idea that you do know it. So there's a basic things that we must know where we must use the semicolons. Okay, and where we must use semicolons just to separate elements in a series that are already contains comma. The students in the class were from Lynchburg, Virginia. Okay, and where we can use next semicolon to join two independent clause when second clause begin with the conjunctive adverb. Like so, that is what I told you even initially with the however, therefore. Okay, so then moreover, furthermore. Okay. So for example, I really have no interest in politics. However, I do like to stay informed by watching the debates. So semicolon. And the next when it comes for colon, so where we must use colon. So even if we have no colon, how we should able to identify. Okay, so where we must use colons, we must use colon to introduce a list preceded by an independent clause. Okay, so the application includes the following pieces. Okay, so I don't want to explain more. Sometimes even it might confuse you. Let me just make it very brief and very simple. So how to use colon? So you must use colon to separate an independent clause. Okay, that is enough. For example, it is enough to look only the example alone. Okay, if you look at the first one, they have agreed on the outcome colon informed participants perform better than do uninformed participants. Okay, so where we have used colons, we have separated the independent clauses. Okay, we have separated into because we have seen, I mean, in the slide before. So colon and semicolon can be used for separating independent clause, right? And where we can identify this apostrophe and even where we can use this apostrophe. Okay, so just we use these to create a contraction, but you need not to use contractions in your academic writing. For example, I don't like him very much. So even sometimes even you can use apostrophe to form possessive nouns. So my mother's job, okay, my mother's apostrophe yes. So sometimes some word which has apostrophe can be even possessive. So what we used to do, sometimes we may fail to notice my mother's. If you just look at, if we have no apostrophe with the mother, so it is a plural noun. Okay, my mother's job. Okay, so like that simple mistake that you can even identify in the sentences, right? So my mother's job is better than all my brother's job put together. Next, do not write use an apostrophe to form a plural. Okay, that is how I said that you must be even very careful. Okay, remember it is a possessive. So we have seen that earlier. So next one is using quotation. So if the sentence ends with a quotation, like a parenthetical citations, or you can even put your final mark of punctuation inside the quotations. Okay, so generally when it comes for quotation, we may remember it's quite applicable with direct and indirect speech. So I hope that you may remember these things in your first year you might have studied. So usually this quotation mark would be quietly used with the direct and indirect speech. So, but anyhow, we must be even very clear. So, just to look at the last, third sentence. If the quotation ends with an exclamation point or question mark, omit the comma. Okay, I hate going to the dentist. John beloved. So sometimes if we have the question and if the sentence ends with the quotation. So usually we use quotation mark in a sentences followed by we used to have comma after the quotation. It is a general rule that we might have studied in direct and indirect speech. But if the same sentence has exclamation, we need not to have a comma. It is just enough to have only the quotation. Okay, so this is the basic one that we must be clear with this, so that there might no chance of leaving that kind of errors when we come with kind of sentences when we go through. Okay, and sometimes, okay, I don't want to confuse you with so many punctuations. So next we'll go with how to manage with errors. Okay, so usually when we comes when we come with a kind of a fragment, usually a complete sentence must have three components that you do know that. So generally for any sentences, it's a very basic thing that what you have learned even in school days. So generally a sentence should have a subject predicate. It's a basic concept, right? So you should be first clear with even the fragment of a sentences first. So a complete sentence must have three components. Number one, it should be a subject. That's actor in the sentences. Okay, so even you might have studied in this active and passive voice. So for active, the actor is playing more an important role in active voice, whereas passive voice, the action is being considered as more important comparatively with the actor. Okay, so subject, next to predicate, that is verb or action, next a complete thought if it can stand alone or making sense. Okay, for example, birds fly. Birds is a subject, fly is a predicate. It's a simple sentences which has only subject and predicate. For example, if I give some other example like I drink I drink cold water, for example. So I is a subject, drink is a verb, cold water when it stands an independent, it stands alone and it is making sense. Okay, and it is making sense. So a complete thought, even that all these all these three together called as a component and it makes a complete sentences. So when you observe that kind of sentences, sometimes in these three words or even in this one sentences, you may have so many punctuations, you may have so many, errors including spelling or grammatical. In that you should able to find out the right. Okay. So fragment is an incomplete sentences. It can stand alone and does not express a complete thought. So what we are talking about fragment. Okay, generally a complete sentence should have these three components. If it doesn't have three components, maybe two or maybe one, so easily we can call that as a fragment, and that is called an incomplete sentences because it cannot stand alone and does not express any complete thought. So some fragments lack either a subject or verb or both. So that is what I said. Sometimes a sentence it mentions only the subject, sometimes it mean only with the predicate, or sometimes it just mean with the last part of a sentences without making any sense. So that is called fragments. Even dependent clause are also fragments if they stand alone. Okay. So some of the examples that you can even notice here. So went out of business after Starbucks coffee opened. And another example, one of my friends who won a contest by playing a variety of instruments since I went fishing. If you just look all these sentences, sometimes it stands alone, sometimes it's making sense, but we can call that as a fragment. Okay. So sometimes sentence error can be noticed within the fragments. Okay, so having punctuations, having grammar, having sound knowledge on all these things, you can able to find out the error. sometimes even the run-on sentences, even the sentence error can be found out from these kind of. We'll see what is run-on sentence. So generally, run-on sentence is a sentence has two or more independent clause not properly separated. So there might be lack of punctuations, or there might be lack of conjunctions. So there might be incorrect punctuations. Okay, so these are called run-on sentences. So run-on sentences doesn't be called as a long sentences, but still, if there is lack of proper punctuations or proper spelling or proper grammar, so those sentences are called run-on sentences. All right. And even you can find out the examples here. So just let me go to the next one, dangling participles. So it might be even the first time that you come across with that kind of word. So dangling participle is a word of phrase that modifies a word and not clearly stated. Okay. So how we can correct such kind of participles? Either you can reword the sentence, or you can try to provide the missing information. Once if you read the sentences, you can able to try. Okay, you can even able to identify. So having finished the assignment, the TV was turned on. So if you look at, so having finished, dangling participle. Okay, finished. And sometimes the error may be identified with the verbs like tenses. So tense when it comes, so I hope that you are familiar with these tenses, right? So present tense, past tense, and future tense. In that we have four. So you must be very clear with this, because we cannot teach everything within a day or within an hour. So something whatever you have learned in the first and second semester, please try to cover all the topics what you have covered earlier. Only then you can able to manage to the extent. Okay. So sometimes even correcting tense shift, be consistent throughout your sentences and paragraph. And even you can be familiar with verb forms and tenses. Okay. So you might be wondering, what is this tense shift examples? Okay. It's very simple. So the sentences error will be based on tenses. For example, the first part of the sentences might be a simple present. The last form of a sentences might be in the form of future. So you must clearly identify the proper sentences. That is the sentence, tense shift examples. For example, about noon, the sky darkened, the breeze sprang up, and the low rumble announces the approaching storm. Okay, so if you look at, so it has been fragmented one after the other. So fragment sentences. Finally, approaching storm. It hasn't been started. Okay, so slowly the tenses being get shifted till the action occurs. So similarly, we viewed a Caribbean mystery and watch intently at John Itson portrays Agatha Crystal Miss Marple. Okay, so just to be very simple, so you must be very clear with the usage of tenses. Okay, that is what I just wanted to make a note of it. And another thing is subject verb agreement. Similarly, as we read subject verb agreement or even concord, there is one more agreement called pronoun antecedent agreement. Okay, it's very simple as such. So pronoun, I hope you know what is. It's a word that takes place of noun. So antecedents is the word that pronouns refer to. That is all. So pronoun must always agree with the antecedents in number, gender, or even in person. So number in the sense might be in the singular form or plural. So gender, masculine, feminine, or neutral. So person, first person, second person, or third person. All right. So sometimes how we can find out the error. So we are familiar in finding the error based on subject verb agreement, but sometimes we may fail. There is one more agreement on this pronoun and antecedent. So even you should be able to find out the error based on this agreement also. So everyone should make their own decision. So almost it's similar to SV agreement. So you need not to be worry on. Need not to worry about it. But still, it's just as a sample, like subject verb agreement. So when it comes to subject verb agreements, so you have nearly 21 rules in your workbook. If you have workbook, even you can plural subject must have a plural verb. And what is the ultimate rule of thumb? Subject ending in yes or plural. It is generally. And verbs ending in yes or singular. So initially we had seen the very first slide, right? And how we can correct these agreement errors. So you should be very familiar with the regular and irregular verb. So what is regular verb? What is irregular verb? So you must be focused on the subject, not on any additional modifiers. All right. So modifiers in the sense, just to be clear with the subject verb agreement. Okay. So need not to have more explanation on these things. So be clear with the subject verb agreement and tenses. Okay. Then what is the thing? Okay, punctuation and all the grammar things. Okay, so next, how we can easily find out the errors. For example, the box of ornaments belong in the attic. Next, high level. If you look at this box of ornament, so ornaments is a plural, but the box of ornaments means it's a singular one. So next, the high level of mercury occurs in some fish. So if you look at subject and always end up with, agree with the verb. So that is how we can easily able to find out the error. Okay, so the box of ornaments belong in the attic. So these are the error examples that you can notice. So how we can try to find out, or sorry, prevent these kind of errors. So first thing that you must edit yourself. In the sense, first you must be very clear with the rules and regulations in the grammar. So that is what the basic rule, that you must be familiar with the subject verb agreement and tenses. Plan ahead, leave yourself enough time to edit, which means time to practice. You must have time to practice. So only practice will help you, okay, to identify so the errors in a sentence as well as in the words, even vocabulary as well. So you can know even your writing weakness, so you can read it aloud or in reverse. So sometimes if you're not able to find out the error in the sentence, once if you start reading it aloud, you can able to identify. Okay. So these are the available sources that even you can have a practice on these things. Okay. Web sources and various books in the sense that you can make use of dictionary or even thesaurus. So if you want to follow a certain style in your writing part, for example, since you are in third year, so for report writing, for submitting your project proposal, so kind of mini project, major project, if you want to submit your report to the head of the department, or okay, in that case, so you must be very clear on which style that you must submit your writing part. Okay, we have different style like APA style, MLA, Turabian. So for example, usually for engineering students, so you might be familiar with this IEEE style. So when you submit your papers or like conference, that you must follow those things. So similarly, when you submit your report kind, so for academic kind of writing, that you must be very clear with different style guides. Okay, so you can have this idea for editing yourself. Okay, so you must be equipped with this kind of style as well as the basic grammar, what's been given in your first and second semester. So that will really help you. So let me just display some of the resources that you can have a look and make a note of it. So when you really prepare yourself at that time, you please make use of these things. And if you have any other doubts, you can even contact this resource, as well as still if you want to know more about it, you can even um, talk to me. Okay, even you can leave a word as well. Okay, we are here to guide you as such. Okay, so I hope the session was little useful to you, and moreover, so the ultimate thing that what I told you is that you must be very clear with things what we have learned earlier. So the first and second semester, so technical and communicative English. So try to cover all the grammar topics before you just start working with the exercise part. Okay, so many questions are available in the net. You can practice. Okay, after you after you have been an expert, after you learn it, okay, learn the clear view of grammar it's been given in your first and second semester workbook. Okay, so I hope the session was useful to you. So any other doubts, you please kindly do let me know, and if you want to share any other thing, you please tell me. Any doubts? Okay, so thank you, students. Thank you, students. And I request everyone to keep practicing over the online. Okay, so here I can just give you a guideline how you can prepare yourself, and we can just